Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Nick. Welcome to the EQ Code. Today, Nick and I are going to be talking about thinking and feeling. I believe this is the third video that we've put together, and so far we've covered a lot of ground. We're talking about the EQ Code, which is a simple logic tool that helps us navigate very, very complex emotional situations. And we've talked first about the little circle, the idea that the little circle represents a human. The circle represents a human, and there are 7.7 billion of us on the planet. That helped us think about the idea of internal and external, about having some boundaries. That helped us deal the framework of me, us, and them, how we can take care of our little circles so that we can work out towards taking care of those within our realm and those beyond in the global world. And now we're at the part, my favorite to talk about is thinking and feeling. This was part of the code that was absolutely just so simple and so helpful and mind-blowing to me. So I'm excited for you to share this with everybody, thinking and feeling.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. I'm excited to talk about thinking and feeling too. As a thinker talking to a feeler, it's even more exciting. So I think it's important to put thinking into feeling into context. When we talk about our little circle, I should do that in black. When we talk about our little circle, there's external, which is everything outside of our circle. Then there's the internal of our circle. And the code, everything that we do with the EQ code is binary. So we only ever divide things into two so that we know, is it this or this? And it helps us to start to navigate the issues really quickly. So we can always find the most important point. So the internal is broken into just two spaces. There's the thinking, which is the front 3% of the brain, the conscious aspect of the brain that we talk about, the prefrontal cortex for all those who are into the brain. And then there's a feeling aspect, which is the back part of the brain, so the unconscious, less obvious part of the brain as far as our intellect goes, but also everything that happens within our body. So all of our reactions, our heart beating fast and our anger and all those sorts of things all fit into that feeling category. So they're very different ways. It's a very different way to look at our body in a very simplistic way. But basically the way our thinking and feeling interact is absolutely critical when it comes to how well we navigate our life. So if our thinking is doing a good job and managing our feelings well for ourselves and others, then we will be, A, we'll have a great life within our own life, and B, we will positively influence the lives of many of those around us. If our thinking is doing an average job, we won't feel so good within ourselves to start with, or those around us will be unhappy with us or unhappy with themselves because we won't be able to teach them how to feel good within themselves as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what I like about the thinking and feeling concept is the idea that when we look at the little circle, we just simplify it down. Feeling is everything inside the little circle. So this image gives us a real feeling for how much and how important our feelings are, and the fact that thinking is just around the outside. If I put those percentages on here, which we use the percentages quite a bit, thinking is just 3% of our conscious intelligence, and feeling is 97% of unconscious intelligence. There's lots of different numbers around the 3% and 97%. You know, it used to be back in the day, when I was a young girl, back in the 80s, it used to be that we're about 10 or 20% of our thinking was conscious, but the longer we go, the more we realize there's a whole heap of unconscious processing that's going on. And I think that's really important to look at. So we look at what's called the maths of mindset. And we take this concept of 3% conscious and 97% unconscious, and we just do some basic calculations around it. So Jenny and anyone who's watching, if I'm to bestow upon you today 100 points of intelligence, then what we've just talked about lets us know that 3 of those points are going to be based on our conscious intelligence that we know about and that we can put our finger on, so to speak. And 97 of those points are going to be based on our feeling-based intelligence. I'll just make that a bit bigger and bolder. So we're splitting it up. So if we were to work with the code and only teach you how to logically think better, and so we were to double your ability to think, then those 3 points would go to 6. The feeling aspect would stay the same, and your new intelligence level would be 103 points. It's sort of okay, but not that impressive. If, however, we didn't teach you how to logically think any better, And of course we do with the code, but if we left that the same and all we did was to teach you to notice, work with, and intuit and use your feelings, that energy that we get from our feelings well, and we doubled the 97 points to 194 points, then your new intelligence level would be 197 points.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive difference. So the point here that some people get stuck on when we first talk about this is, well, how do I know if you're going to double it? Well, my experience is if we're talking to strong thinkers, that's the highly logical individual and someone who would never call themselves a feeler, we will way more than double their ability to work with their feelings. We do it off the radar. So it's not a point of whether or not we're going to double it. That's an irrelevant discussion because it's way more than that. The point here is there's a 3-point increase if we focus on improving just our logic, but there's a 97-point increase if we focus on using our feelings well. So it's 30 times more effective to work with our feelings and learn how to use our feelings well than it is to just improve our logic. That makes sense.
That right there, I remember when I read that, it really flipped a switch for me, because so long growing up, and I don't know about you growing up, but feelings weren't really talked about. Feelings weren't valued as much. I'm not saying in my family, just in my whole realm, in terms of schooling, my friends, people around me, movies, the culture that I lived in. Feelings were actually kind of denigrated and seen as something that were weak and that you needed to manage or put a lid on or control, rather than highlight and emphasize and utilize.
Yes, and we're still in our culture these days because everyone thinks make your decisions logically. So we're even as a culturally yet, we're not acknowledging that thinking is never the actual final decision maker. So our decisions are always made with our feelings, whether we're logically aware of it or not. Our unconscious has made the decision. So that's interesting. And as a strong thinker, I used to think that feelers, I would never call myself a feeler. These days, I proudly call myself a feeler, but that's only in the last decade. So I think it's important to get a bit more of a handle on what feelings are. So this diagram, it starts off with the basic little circle. We're talking about the external is everything outside it. Internal is inside the little circle. So that's what we're doing. And then we're splitting the internal up into the feeling aspect and the thinking aspect, or the feelings down here and the thinking. So this page takes us through some words, because everything in the code, it's ridiculously simplified. So the word feeling and thinking, we want to understand that it covers a whole range of things. So when I say it, it's really simplistic. So what the words that fit under this category would be 97% and 3%. So when we use the code, if I say 97% and 3%, I may as well be saying feeling and thinking. They're exactly the same in our work. So
they're interchangeable.
I think you have an English background, don't you? So I'm bastardizing the English language here. And this is the important concept. We don't want to be too specific here. We want to be really broad. So feeling happens in the body. Of course, we also use the back of the brain, but if we're going to split up body and head, thinking happens in the head, feeling happens in the body. Thinking is IQ based, feeling is EQ based. So the word EQ would be a feeling word and IQ would be a thinking word. Of course, both actually cross over, but we're simplifying it down. And we even go down to a concept of a metaphor, just so we start to really get a feeling for this. Our feelings are effectively the horse in a horse and rider team. And our thinking is the rider. Why? Because the rider is more conscious. The rider consciously thinks about where to go, but the horse has the power and the energy and the drive. And that happens in our own body. Our feelings give us the power, the energy, and the drive and the will to do something. And our thinking, so it's almost the engine, and the thinking is just the steering wheel. So there's a lot of us who are strong thinkers who go, no, I'm the steering wheel. I'm the most important thing that there is. Well, yes, as long as the feelings are working with you, and if we're going to appreciate that, then what happens is our thinking takes us in directions that sees our feelings getting triggered. And a triggered feeling is like a wild horse, not very useful to us at all. So we want our thinking and feeling to work together beautifully. So the whole aim is for that inner part of ourselves, our feelings, to be really appreciated and validated by our thinking. So everything about the EQ code, and we'll talk about it more in future sessions, is how do we get our thinking to notice our feelings and start to work well with them? Because when our thinking and our feeling is working well together and in harmony within ourselves, we become this beautiful individual externally to others. But when our thinking what often happens these days is our thinking beats up on our own feelings. Do you know, you're an idiot, we're stupid, we're dumb. Do you know, with this really negative internal relationship. And we are harsh to others. But the other version of that, if I come down to this diagram just quickly, is when we start off as a little baby, tiny little circle, we're all feeling. There's no thinking there.
Yeah.
So we all come out the same, total feeling oriented. It doesn't matter where you're born, in what part of the world, we're a little feeling machine. And depending on what part of the world we're born into, as to what thinking we will be taught.
Yes.
Now, for some of us, we're taught, thinking's not that important. You know, just feel your way through life. And so we become a light thinker, but a very strong feeler. But for others of us, we grow up in households, as you talked about before, where thinking's really important. You know, never mind those feelings, and we build up layers and layers and layers of logic. Now, that has its benefits in that we become logically robust, resilient individuals. But what doesn't happen is when globalization happens and we start to bring people of different tribes together and we start to live life across next to people who have totally different rules surrounding their feelings, as we start to believe that these thinking-based rules that we've come up with, our rules are more right than someone else's rules in the globe. And we neglect that. At the end of the day, we're all feeling-based machines, and the only reason our thinking is there is to protect our feelings. And some of us have been taught to protect it in a way that's not necessarily conducive to being around other little circles who think differently.
Yeah, and I would think based on your past experiences, that ring around could get really, really thick if you had some trauma in your life, or if you had some experiences where it was useful to have a thick shell at some point, but we tend to carry those kinds of things over into adulthood when those just don't become useful anymore.
Correct. So it can lead to negative relationships. It can lead to us getting stuck and not being able to move our job, even though we want to. We think we should stay in exactly what we're doing. And also, you know, we all know someone in our life who's just totally rigid in their thinking, and they've lived in the same small community with the same small people telling them the same small things are right, and they just become totally black, like that, totally locked out to any other view of the world. And it suits their world, but it doesn't suit everyone, and they can't see that. They're only willing to protect their own feelings. So there's, you know, it's really important as a global society that we learn to start to really be able to question our thinking and to check, is it suitable for this environment, the people that we're talking to, and is it suitable for the globe as it's evolving?
Love it, love it. Will you show us the diagram of the synergy while we're kind of talking about that idea of starting to work with our thinking and our feeling together? I think it's such a cool image.
So everything that we've done today is based on just a very simplistic concept of what is thinking. It's the front part of the brain, it's the 3%, it's the logic that we've been taught from a child growing up. And then it's the feelings, again, very simplistically, it's the back part of the brain and everything in our body. Once we understand that, basically, we can start to have really cool discussions to work out, and as we talk about in the future sessions, are our feelings running the race here, and is that good or bad, or is our thinking overruling us in that, is that good or bad? And we can start to choose in the moment, is it our thinking that's the issue, or is it our feeling that's the issue? So we can start to get more and more flow in our life and make decisions that are good for our own little circle, but also many other little circles on the planet as well. Yeah, so we want to become that thinking and feeling machine, rather than just the strong thinker that I used to be, thinking that all feelers were stupid, or the feelers just looking at thinkers and going, they're brutal. It's neither is the case. Does that make sense? We're both we're all good people, and the trick is to start to learn from, so thinkers and feelers in the individual can learn from each other how to look after our own internal thinking and feeling. Yeah,
and how to become strong in both areas, flexible, strong and soft at the same time. Flexible.
And that's where the power is, when we're beautifully soft but strong individuals.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This is Nick and Jenny. We're signing off on the EQ Code, where we work with simple logic to help us effortlessly navigate the social situations that we encounter. Thanks, Nick.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jenny. See you.